When you have dedicated months or even years of your life pursuing a goal, it can be really tough to pivot and change course, even if deep down you know it's time to do so. There's no playbook for knowing exactly when or how to pivot, but I've had a few conversations about this exact topic lately, so I thought I'd share a couple of things I've learned from two specific points in my own journey where I was faced with the decision to continue on my current course and stay comfortable, or pivot and leap into uncharted territory. Welcome back to the podcast. I just love hanging out with you on a weekly basis. Even though I can't see you, I love getting to see the stories that you share, the episodes that you're listening to. My favorite is when you show me where you are in the world when you're listening to podcasts. Shout out to my girl Cindy. She loves to text me pictures of her on her walks. And when I do extra long episodes, I say you're welcome for giving her extra steps. So if you're someone who listens to podcasts while you exercise, just know that the extra long episodes are ones where I'm just trying to help you out, girl, trying to help you get those extra steps, a little extra sweat session. And wherever you're listening today, I am just grateful that you're here. I am getting so excited because we're nearing the end of July when this episode launches, when you are listening to it. And that means we are getting so close to Powerhouse Women 2019. You know, this is an event I spend an entire year dreaming about, planning, and as we start to wind down the weeks, it's funny, the time in the summer seems to go really quickly. It seems like time flies by, and we are going to be together in Scottsdale, Arizona before we know it. But I wanted to make sure that you saw our announcement. We are doing something this year that we've never done before, a fun little twist to this year's event, with the addition of a Friday night kickoff party. And we're going to do it slumber party style, like adult slumber party style, because we hear it all the time. Women want more time and opportunities to connect with each other. That is a big reason why the Powerhouse Women event exists. And with a day full of amazing content on Saturday, sometimes it can be tough to do that and meet everyone that you want to meet. So we thought, what is a dressed down way that we can give women more opportunities to connect? And so we decided to do it with the ultimate girls' night in. So let me try that again. Prosecco and pajamas, or pajamas and Prosecco, you can say it either way. It's really interchangeable, is our theme for this year, and it's just going to be so much fun. You can get your ticket for that as well as the event by going to our website, and that's just at www.powerhousewomen.co/event. And as always, of course, I will hook you up. I will link that in the show notes for you, and I can't wait to see you there. It's just going to be such a blast. Okay, so let's dive in and talk a little bit about this topic today, which is making a pivot. And it's interesting how so many of the podcast episodes you hear are inspired by real conversations with you, our girl gang. So whether that is in person, through a DM, or sometimes it's just feedback or a comment that you leave on our social media, we really do listen. And I want to hear what you're going through at the moment, because when I say we are not meant to do this alone, I really mean it. And today's show is one of those. It is inspired by a conversation I had this past week with my friend Lisa, and it had me reflect on two really critical points in my own journey where I had the choice to pivot. And these decisions were difficult in the moment. And truthfully, the decision to pivot is usually something that we've thought about for months before actually making the leap. But deep down, looking back, I knew that the choice to pivot was absolutely right for me. It just took my mind a little while to catch up to where my heart was at. So if you're currently in a place where you feel torn between what's comfortable and what you've always known, and a new vision that is really asking for your attention. And it's a little scary. I can so relate, like on such a personal level, I can relate. And I remember thinking along the journey at different points that I could never imagine myself deviating from the path I was currently on. I'm going to get into this a little bit more when I talk about, the pivot from focusing on my wellness business. That was everything to me. I could never imagine wanting to ever do something different. And that's actually how I feel now with everything I'm doing with Powerhouse Women in this podcast. But I think I've learned to stay open to new evolutions of the current vision that I have, because oftentimes that is where the biggest blessings have come from, the biggest breakthroughs, more fulfillment that I even knew was possible. So if you're not in a position right now where you feel that pull toward a pivot, I just want you to file this topic away and come back to it if you need a little pep talk when and if you find yourself in that position down the road. But this could really relate to anything in life. We're going to talk about it more specifically in terms of fulfilling your vision. But if you listen really closely, this could relate to you feeling the need to pivot from, a group of friends you've currently been hanging out with, a relationship you've been in. It could really relate to anything, although we're going to apply it specifically to following your purpose, your career, your overall, journey in life, we'll call it. So when I was talking with Lisa, we were just having this, heart-to-heart, soul sister kind of chat and talking about this pull toward something new. And it had me really reflect back and bring to mind two specific, really clear points in my own journey that I was at a crossroads. And the one thing I had in common at both of these junctures was I was at a place where deep down I knew I could no longer give 100% focus to growing two things at the same time anymore. So often, a lot of us start businesses as this passion project, as a side hustle. And for some of us, maybe that's exactly where you always plan for that vision to stay. And that's perfect. That is so beautiful. And there's so much great work being done in the world as a side project, a side hustle. And there's no need to give up everything and go all in. That's just not always going to be the case for everyone. But I was at the point, and I'm going to talk about the two different times where I felt this, where I was starting to feel pulled toward the new vision, the thing that was my side hustle. And something in me was just deep down telling me this was supposed to become my full-time focus. I don't know what that little voice was. We could, dissect it all day. And, whatever that was, wherever that was coming from, I couldn't deny it anymore. And I started to realize this when I saw myself getting almost resentful about something I used to be really passionate about. There are points in our businesses where something that we love, gets frustrating or there's challenges that come up. I'm not talking about those points. I'm talking about the point when you realize all of the joy that you once felt pursuing something has shifted. And part of that is natural, but there's a difference between getting into more of I always think of it like a romantic relationship, getting past the honeymoon phase into just the commitment phase. Yeah, we're in this, we're going to do this. And realizing when something you've outgrown the current vision that you're working toward. So the first time that I remember feeling this was when I had started my wellness business. I started this as a side hustle. I've shared that story. If you care to listen and haven't heard it, you can go back to episode 1. But I'd started this business on the side just really as something to fulfill a passion of mine, which was health and wellness. Now, what I was doing in my full-time job, if you haven't heard that episode, spoiler alert, I sold flooring. I sold commercial carpet, which you can imagine just didn't quite fulfill me in the same way as helping someone become the healthiest, most vibrant version of themselves. Shockingly, no one ever called and said, "You saved my life selling me that carpet." So it was very clear to me very early on that I was really excited about the idea of pursuing a passion, a vision, a business that gave me that sense of fulfillment every day. And I had the benefit of having a lot of flexibility in my job, which allowed me to pour time and energy into building up this side business to the point where it was becoming successful enough that the idea of jumping full-time into my own business started to enter my mind. And obviously, this was a whole conversation between my husband and I. I'm blessed that at that point we were married. I was in a dual income household where I had that ability to make that decision, take a little bit more risk. We've gone into the whole, when do you take the leap and go full-time entrepreneur? We've had a couple podcast episodes on that. But I want to focus more on how I knew I was ready to pivot. And for me, it came down to my integrity. Now, I know plenty of people, and I'm not judging them at all, plenty of people who are like, I'm going to continue to collect my paycheck as long as my employer will let me. I'm going to continue to, have that financial security coming in to allow me more time to focus on my vision. And I don't know what it was for me, but there got to a point where I realized, especially because I had a lot of flexibility, there was a lot of wiggle room. I was working remotely, and all I wanted to do all day long was focus on my business. Now, it would have been really easy for me to just take advantage of that flexibility and start to focus more time during my working hours on my own business than I was on the employer who was paying me. But deep down, that just didn't feel right. It felt so out of integrity to not give 100% to the person who is sending me a paycheck every month. And I hung in there for quite a while. I was able to just get more resourceful, be more efficient with getting everything done that I promised to provide for my employer, and fully at the end of the day go to bed knowing I had given my 100%. But it was when that 100% started to dip into like 95, 90, and then, on down from there, where my heart just truly was not in it. It was actually, I'm just going to tell this funny story because it makes me giggle. I was in a meeting with one of our biggest clients. It was a huge restaurant chain that we provided flooring for, brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars of business. And I'm in a meeting with this client who I had a great relationship with, and they were debating, making a change in their flooring. And outwardly, my mouth is having this conversation of, what kind of flooring would be the best choice? And inside, this little voice was screaming, I don't effing care. I don't care what kind of flooring you put in your restaurant. And that was the point where I kind of took a step back and I was like, okay, maybe this is time to really start thinking seriously about my exit strategy. It just wasn't fair. I knew it wasn't fair to that client who deserved like the highest level of service we could provide. It wasn't fair to my employer. I knew that my heart was pulling me in another direction, and the only thing stopping me from truly making the leap at that point was fear. It was fear of disappointing people. It was fear of, will this business really go as well as I hope? But the truth is, and I'm going to circle back to the thing I started off with saying, I could no longer grow my sales for my employer and grow my sales for my own business. I didn't have any more energy or resources to give at that point, and I had to choose. Because if we ride the fence and if we try to be 100% in two worlds, especially two very different worlds, eventually something is going to suffer. And at the end of the day, I definitely didn't want that to be my new business. But most importantly, I didn't want that to start to affect my family or my marriage, because I was trying to be everything to everyone. So I started to put a plan into place to transition out of my role. Again, everyone's situation is going to be different. I don't want you to just hear this example as if you want to leave your job to pursue your business. This could be anything at all that you want to make the transition out of. And you have to know your situation. So for example, it felt really in integrity for me to start to open up a conversation with my boss and my team about making a transition that left them in a better place and didn't surprise anyone when I just popped in a 2-week notice, but also gave me the time to get myself organized. Now, I realize not everyone has that ability. If you have a boss that's going to fire you immediately when you say you're building your own thing, please don't go quit your job. Do not do that. I knew my situation well enough, and my husband almost killed me when I did this. I actually started the conversation with my boss in April, letting him know my plan was to be done at the end of that year. So I don't recommend, again, please hear me out. I don't recommend putting in an 8-month notice of leaving your job if you are not in a place where you know the person on the receiving end of that conversation is going to support you in that transition. But there's other things that you can do to make that transition with integrity in a way that has you feel as though you're supporting the role that you're leaving, and also supporting yourself to truly follow your heart and your passion. And oftentimes it does require a difficult conversation. And I get that that sucks sometimes. We're going to talk a little bit about the disappointing people part at the end. But the biggest thing I want you to take away from that is really check your heart. And if you know you're not able to 100% give your energy to something anymore, the best thing you can do for yourself and the other party is to start seriously thinking about what a transition looks like. And there's a lot of different ways that that can look. The second point that I had this crossroads of making a pivot, this is actually really recent, and it's something that I almost feel like I'm kind of still grieving in a way, and that's going to sound kind of weird, but I'll get to that in a minute. And that was making the pivot from focusing on my health and wellness business to giving myself permission to lean full on in to this vision of powerhouse women. Now, I started at the beginning by saying this is something I never, ever in a million trillion years imagined myself doing, because I love my health and wellness business. And I still have it. I always will. At least that's it. That's what I feel like. I will always have that business. But this was more of like an energetic shift, giving myself permission that I didn't have to try and be, again, 100% dedicated to growing that entity at the same time I was 100% dedicated to growing this one. Because there were things that I wanted to do, like start this podcast, other collaborations, things that were always in my mind, but I wasn't leaving any mental space or time in my calendar to pursue. And I had invested a lot of my, how do I want to say this? My identity was really, really tied up in that business. So it honestly felt like cutting off a limb to say that, okay, I'm going to give myself permission to kind of energetically step back and not focus attention on growing that business anymore. I will still, so I kind of like wrote out, well, what is my new role going to look like? You know, I'm going to still support the customers that I have. I'm still going to, here's the ways that I'm still going to be available for support. I'm not shutting the door completely, but I have, again, an exit strategy. I set systems in place to allow me to focus my attention fully on growing what we're doing within Powerhouse Women. And again, that was so tough to do. But at the same time, if I'm honest, and again, this is recent, this energetic shift took place at the beginning of this year. I would say even as recent as like 3-4 months ago that I fully was able to almost like open up my hands. If you imagine like your fists clenched, and it was like this thing for me that I was so attached to, that this was going to be, this health and wellness business is where I was going to be successful. This is where I was going to be, make my impact and really experience the fulfillment I always wanted to experience. But there was something in me deep down. I mean, I almost feel like God was just really trying to show me that there was just another plan. And everything I learned there was now going to carry over into a new entity that, for whatever reason, I couldn't even explain why, I was feeling so drawn to lean into. But I couldn't do both. I couldn't grow both, just like I couldn't grow my sales and my corporate job while I was growing my health and wellness business to the level I wanted to. There came a point, and for a while I did both, and I did both really well. But there came a point where I could no longer grow Powerhouse Women the way that I wanted to, while also growing and putting my energy toward growing this health and wellness business that I had built. So for me, that transition was really clear when I noticed that what used to bring me so much joy was now feeling more like a chore. It was almost like I was resenting, I don't even know who, for keeping me trapped in a role that truly I had created for myself. And sometimes it's helpful just to take a step back and really allow ourselves to feel whatever feelings are coming up. Because for me, this was a difficult decision because I actually love both. I didn't want to have to choose, but it was not doing anyone a service anymore to try to kind of just be half in on both projects. And then, in the space that it created by energetically just giving myself permission and putting the things in place, having the difficult conversations that I had to have with people, that my role in that health and wellness business was no longer going to be what it once was. It cleared this space. And in that space, first it was scary. It was scary because it was unknown. I didn't know if I trusted myself. Could I make this new entity just as successful as the other one? Did I have what it takes? I was so comfortable there. I've invested now, 9 years of my life into that world. I knew it like in the back of my hand. And now I was trusting myself to step out and make my mark in a new way, in a space where I have no, I don't want to say credibility. I have credibility. I had no name for myself. I don't know. That sounds weird to say. I think you get what I mean. I was sort of unknown. Maybe that's the best way to say it. But in the space that it created, almost, not immediately, but I would say so I really energetically was able to make that choice back in spring. And then a few weeks later, and I kid you not, I'm not sure this will happen for you, but a few weeks later, a new opportunity opened up that truthfully, had I still been trying to do both, run two businesses, give myself fully to both, I wouldn't have had space for this new opportunity. But it's going to allow me to exponentially grow the impact that we're making, exponentially. I get chills thinking about it. Exponentially grow the financial resources, everything I was afraid that I wouldn't have if I let go. I didn't actually find that. I didn't actually start to see those new opportunities until I created the space and trusted the journey, trusted myself enough to let go. So sometimes when we make these pivots, it does mean letting other people down or just simply not meeting their expectations, honestly. And if you have some people-pleasing tendencies like I do, this can be brutal. So brutal. It still makes me cringe, thinking about having to disappoint people. But here's what I've learned, and I really, really want you to hear my heart on this. Sometimes in business or life in general, we have to make decisions that deep down we wholeheartedly believe are best for us and they're best for the other person, even if the other person doesn't see it that way. So while my employer was really sad to see me go and really wanted me to stay. I was breaking an expectation. He had expectations for me to move up into leadership and all these things. I knew that it was best for me and it was best for the company because I could no longer give my 100%. Same thing with making the shift in my wellness business. I had to break some relationships that were so hard to break. And those people will still be in my life, but not in the same role. But I knew that I was almost enabling them by continuing to pretend like I could be the same me in a role that I was maybe a few years ago, and that I could continue to be that person. When deep down I knew that I couldn't. And in fact, I was almost hindering their growth by pretending that I was still that same person. And that's the toughest thing, is when we know deep down we're making the decision to pivot that is best for us, but it is also the best for the other person in the situation, even if they don't see it that same way. So just remember, you can't be all things to all people. And sometimes we have to let go of what's good to make space for what can be great. And I know making a pivot can be so scary and uncertain, but that's why we like to remind you as often as we can that you are not meant to do business or life alone.